The UFO world is full of research from amateur sleuths to professional scientists who have an intrigue into the unknown. Tonight on Beyond Humanity, we take a look at the great research from Lynda Thompson. Her quest for the truth of the UFO phenomena has taken her on a quest through the labyrinth of UFO study. What she's learned will have you scratching your heads, wondering how could this information be hidden right in front of our eyes? Welcome to Beyond Humanity on UAPresearch.com. Lynda, welcome to Beyond Humanity.
Hi, Scott. How are you doing? I'm sorry, Dave. Oh, God. Sorry.
Oh, that's all right. That's what happens when you have two first names. You know, Lynda, thank you so much for taking the time to do this. And you are somebody who I have been following for a number of months now. And every tweet you seem to put out, because you're mainly active on Twitter, it seems to be focused on real information at real-time events. Before we get deep into what your research has found, we need to introduce the UFO world to you. How did you get involved, or why did you want to get involved with this?
Okay. I have been involved with UFOs all my life. It was something that was natural to our family and had a lot of sightings and different experiences. So it wasn't a matter to me of whether UFOs and the phenomena existed, but it just existed. And so then I wanted to find out more into the history of the different cases and do more research into what had been going on. I found that a lot of the information was not well researched. Some of it was wonderful and great, but some of it had a lot of speculation to it and just adding on one story on top of another story. So that's how I got into it.
You talk about how UFOs have been a part of your life ever since you could remember. Was it an experience, or did you just have a family full of sci-fi fanatics who really thought that the truth was out there somewhere?
No, it was experiences and many sightings. And we had family events and I had individual events. And it became more pronounced later on. So, yes.
Personal sightings and experiences are often tough for a lot of experiencers to explain and go through, because sometimes they're good, sometimes they're bad, and other times they are very ugly. And I could just tell by your body language that this may not be a subject that you really want to uncover as of this time. And that's quite all right, you know, for what we are doing here. But let's get to this personal side for you. Okay. Obviously, these experiences that you have had have become personal to you, and this has become a personal journey. So with the fact that this is a personal journey to try and figure out what was going on, is there anything you feel comfortable in discussing on why this subject is so important to you and finding not only answers, but truthful answers?
Yes, it's a very mixed bag, as everybody knows. It can be very negative, or there can be positives, and I've gone through all of it. And Samantha Mullet helped me to understand some of it better. I've had a really tough experience, and it was about 1998. I always have to think about the year because we had moved to San Antonio, and it was a very dramatic experience that affected me very deeply. Some damage to me, but it was damage to my vehicle. I had marks, dent on it. My computer in the car had to be replaced. My radio never worked again. So it wasn't just me. There was actual evidence at the time. I was supposed to be picking my son up from a friend's house. And when I didn't show up, then my husband and son were panicking. And on top of that, I had left a screaming message on the answering machine at home. That was back before there was a lot of anything else. I had a flip phone in the car with me. And so I was screaming in that, but then that got lost in the car later. So I couldn't call to tell them that I was on the way home. So they were completely panicked when I showed up hours later. And so I came to an intersection that was in the country north of San Antonio. And it was a stop sign where, you stop. And I always stop, even though it's out in the country. And when I looked to the right, there was this, it was like almost, the image was like a huge house that was all lit up, just extreme lights all over it. Well, I knew for a fact from having driven it many times at night to pick my son up from the friend's house that there was no house there. And so I was looking, trying to figure out what I was seeing. And here comes these beings towards me. Now, I would say they were kind of like tall grays, but I don't know the colors because it was dark. But immediately I was like, I don't know what this is. It's not like, it wasn't a whole lot. I had never been a sci-fi watcher. Close Encounters, third kind, yeah. But this was tall, but it was very, I don't know, gangly, I guess you could say. And there was like 5 of them that were coming towards me, but they weren't like walking. It was too fast for them to be walking. And I saw one of them over the front of my car, and it was standing up above the hood. So I know it was way taller than 3 feet, 4 feet. And then the door opened. And when the door opened, I screamed, and that was it. Now, I had tried to go through regression with one person. She was not an experiencer regressioner, so she did not do well when I was going through this event, and she stopped it and said she couldn't handle it. So, and I haven't gone through it again. I pretty much have come to terms with a lot since then, but that is just, I tell people that's my worst experience, because
you talk about meeting up with and chatting with a good friend of mine, Samantha Mowat. And I don't know if you know this, but back on April 15th, 2014, 25 minutes after meeting Samantha, her and I walked into a forest to see extraterrestrials.
I've seen your show on that. Yeah.
Yeah. And so Samantha, how did she help you in regards to understanding what you were going through? Because in my opinion, people in this community who do not know who Samantha Mowat is are really missing out on the real deal of true information of ET contact.
Well, okay. And I will say the next day I took my husband and we drove out there And I'm like, okay, I don't know what happened, but this is where it was. There was no house there, you know. And the thing was, for years, I think he knew what we had been going through. And every time something would come up, he'd throw away like the evidence. You know, it's like if it's not there, you can't, you know, so the tape was thrown out or this was done. But I had the consultation with Samantha on, I think it was Skype. And I didn't tell her exactly what I was dealing with, just that I needed to consult with her. And that, you know, I thought I had this lifelong experience situation and I figured she was going to ask me a bunch of questions when we got on the line, but no, it was like she read my mail backwards and forwards and told me stuff that I'd never ever told anybody before. And so it really helped me. And she helped me to see that it was multiple groups dealing with me and kind of helped me sort out what the groups were doing and that they weren't all to harm me or whatever, you know. So it's a very deep past history that I have with them. So, you know, my husband and I, we've married 40 years. And I would say that it's been greatly complicated. You know, it's a miracle that we are still married.
And it is trying when you have these experiences and cannot really explain. I'm sure it led to a lot of nights of arguing and fighting and bickering and accusations on one way or another. What does it mean to you to have someone like Samantha or anyone else in this field to look you deadpan in the eye, whether it's in person or on Skype, to tell you, I believe you? Because so many experiencers out there and people who will watch this who have had their own experiences know exactly what we're talking about in regards to, you know, people not wanting to believe. They want to shove it under the rug or pretend that they didn't hear that conversation. And for us who are experiencers, it really goes down a road of my best friend or my parents or whoever is denying me this conversation and I need to talk about it. So what was it like to have someone like Samantha say, I believe you?
Well, I mean, everything that she said, it was more than obvious that it wasn't just a believing, that she knew, you know, in her ways, you know, which she explained, but in her ways, she knew these things and had advice for me. And I guess in a way you can say that she's kind of like a midwife as far as helping you to get through the process and, you know, gives you some advice and some recommendations and can answer the questions, but help you go through the pain kind of thing, you know, or to at least know that, okay, well, you know, because I have friends now that are going through this and it's like, you know, I know this happened, but still there's that part of you that is going, are you sure you're okay? You know? And so, I mean, and that's kind of what I do on Twitter, is that I'm kind of like the mama bear for experiencers that, you know, I try to let people know that if they need to communicate, to DM me or whatever. And, you know, so I just try to set up a protective wall.
That actually leads us to a little point, a little bit off topic from where we are going, but I want to ask you this then, because of the comment you made about being a mama bear for experiencers. Over the last couple of years through ufology, we have really seen a focus on what the government knows. We've seen a focus on the scientific aspect of everything. And really, for the last number of months on my show, Spaced Out Radio, we have really been kind of pushing the agenda that the experiencers are the forgotten souls out of this entire phenomena the last 3 years. Would you agree with that assertion that the experiencers have really been pushed to the side over the last couple of years and we're losing a lot of premium information that potentially has answers?
Yes. I see that we're going through the same cycles now as far back as the Patel study, the Blue Book Project study. We're going through the exact same things over and over and over, even on all the scientific things. You know, it doesn't matter how much science we do, and I do want the science. I do want Skyhub. That's on my list. I want all of that. But experiencers have information. And I started going through last week to come up with a list of books just on alien abductions. It was unbelievable how many books there are. Now, a lot of these books are written by people that maybe no one's ever heard. That doesn't mean they're false. It doesn't mean they're true. But if you look at all the books that are out there, you can't say this doesn't happen, you know, especially when you see them from Kathleen Martin and very well educated, spoken people, you know, and there's patterns just like in the craft crashes and, you know, reported recoveries. As a researcher, I look for patterns to see if there are patterns in the recoveries that fit, you know, what's going on. Now, experiencers are going to have different events, and some of them are going to be way, way, way out there. And if they're cookie cutter, then yeah, they're probably not going to be real. But if we would just read and listen instead of judging every single word, we may learn more.
Lynda, what do you think is one of the biggest messages or pieces of information that the scientific community is missing or not properly interpreting from the experiential community?
That is so hard. I think, you know, Valet, of course, he can run you in circles sometimes, you know, because it's either seems like it's in a myth or a deception category, but then there are also the metals and all of that. So we seem to go around in circles on some of it. I think that part of it is it's not the procedures. Okay, so for instance, with Stephen Greer or CE5s or any of those, Chris Bledsoe's, it's not the cookie cutter ABC what we're doing. It's the overall pattern. For instance, I am more on Chris Bledsoe's level as far as what I do. And so anybody who says that you have to do CE5 is wrong. You know, they may look at that as a scientific process because we can go 1 to 5 or whatever. This is what you have to do. But the fact is, it's not what you have to do. People have experiences all the time without doing maybe anything. But I've always have been very spiritual, like Chris Bledsoe, and that's how it was presented through me. So I just find this hard. The other thing is, and we won't know until the Sky Hub is up and running for a lot of us, whether there's going to be electronic interference with the equipment, since a lot of this seems to be electronic based that goes on with us. I mean, our bodies are magnetic or whatever. And so, and the phenomena itself is. Now, I know I've picked up some things with my psionics camera that I can see, some other people can see, and I wouldn't have known it was there if I didn't have the psionics. But at the same time, you can show pictures all day long. You can show sounds all day long. Whatever, it's not going to mean anything to a lot of people. And so I don't know. I feel like no matter what, people aren't going to believe it unless they see something with their eyes that's so dramatic that they can't write it off.
Do you get triggers in when they are coming?
Yes, I do.
What is your trigger?
I can feel, it depends if I'm in bed or somewhere else, but I feel we hear this hum, droning sound, pulsing sound. We had it the other night, and it vibrates in me. I can feel it. And it's like, as soon as that happens, I'm usually like out like a light. But if we're driving, I can sometimes know they're coming tonight or they're coming. You know, I can feel that. I have other things that go on that mean other things. So, you know, there's a lot of different signals that I get. And so, yeah. There's been times in the past that, you know, my husband would get up in the morning and he'd go, "Where was you last night?" And I go, "What do you mean, where was I last night? I was in bed." He goes, "No, you weren't." He said, "I looked all through the house." He says, "I looked outside. Our cars were here. Your keys were here. Your purse was here. All the doors were locked. You were gone." And I said, "I don't know what you're talking about." Well, of course, I know what happened. And that's happened many times since we've been married. And I also wake up in these weirdly weird, bizarre places, like stuffed underneath a sewing machine or something that I wouldn't have gotten there, you know, and I have to get him to help me get out. But there's things like that all the time that have happened through our marriage. And of course, that creates arguments and fights, and, you know, because you just don't, that's just not normal. You know,
I hear you there. You know, I could talk all night about your experiences and what you have gone through, and maybe soon we'll have to do that again. But you have recently done some very serious research over the years in order to try and figure out what is going on, not only with you, but experiencers in general. I want to ask you, on your research front, why did you think it was important to start digging into what the government of the United States knows about all of this UFO information?
Um, Many reasons. My father is a big factor in the past. Um, Also, his mother, there was something that I can't say landed, it more like blasted through her front yard. It was a deep, deep hole that the Air Force could not measure at that time. It was in the very early 60s. And Project Blue Book was out. It's not on the records that are on available. Maybe they're in the records that is hidden away, somewhere. But the Air Force came out. They said it wasn't like a missile, that kind of thing. And they put a cement platform over it. I was there. I remember the incident. So that's one example of something that should have been in the records. It's not in the records. And every time I see new records, I look. So that's just one example of it. There's, many other examples, but I look at all kinds of archives, all kinds of records all the time. And there's things there that if people had access to all the records and could ask the right questions, we might know more, but people won't take the time. I spend a lot of time researching, sometimes up to 12 hours a day, just doing records. And somebody wants you to give them 140 characters of what you found, So that's part of the problem.
Lynda, your stories of your own personal experiences have been absolutely amazing, and we could talk literally about those all night long. But one of the big reasons why we have you here is recently you have been doing some major research into the governmental and the secrecy side of this entire phenomena. Why was that important to you to go down this road as an experiencer?
I needed to do it. I was invested in the subject. I was invested in wanting the information to come out, that it was not a joke, that it is a real phenomenon. It is something that people need to know. I feel like there is a point where people have to know. And if the government is keeping the secret, then it's just going to make everything worse. So all of this research, quote, research with the government has been going on for decades, with just chasing around and around, and it needs to be taken more seriously.
Lynda, for one of the companies that you mentioned in your study, it may not be a familiar household name when it comes to UFOs. It's a company called Battelle, and this is a company out of the state of Ohio. What were you able to learn about them?
Okay, they are a nonprofit organization. They were started in 1923 by Gordon Battelle. In 1925, as part of his trust, it was incorporated as a nonprofit organization, a charity organization, and is nonprofit per the IRS. And so everything that it does is at no tax to them. And that is true across the states where it's located, and it is an international corporation. They basically, what they do is that they perform science and laboratory and research for corporations, and they get paid for it by those corporations. So the individual corporations don't have to have scientists or labs or equipment. They can pay Battelle to do that research for them. And so that's how they make their money, and they can have the best scientists available because of that. And that is very attractive to the government to be able to do that. And they retain them for different projects, including the SAPs and likely the USAPs.
Okay, what was that smoking gun piece of information that you found that tied Battelle to the UFO phenomena?
Okay, going through the different CIA documents, there are a number of documents that it does talk about the research that is being done on the UFOs. Well, it was flying saucers was the popular term back then. I have one example of a memo right here that I can pull up, and it talks about okay, so this is Battelle and Lieutenant Rupert and Colonel Kirkland confirmed with members of Redacted on this 26th of December 1951 in regard to Project Grudge. It was the question of whether or not there was enough material available on unidentified aerial objects to warrant a detailed scientific study, and decided that there was enough material available, and Redacted was a proposal to furnish consultants in the fields of astronomy, and it goes on and on. So that right there was just one piece of evidence to me and to other people that are researching this to say, yes, they had something. It's not the only thing, but that was very clearly the case there.
That they were working on some sort of crash retrieval. Being 1951, we could only assume that that might have been the Roswell material, considering we do know that pieces of the Roswell crash were originally flown out to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, which would technically be close enough for Battelle's main office and scientific laboratories to potentially work on this.
Correct. That is exactly correct. And they started researching it earlier than that by the CIA documents. They were in the advisory groups and the working groups to research the flying saucer problem, as they referred to it.
Why do you think they were calling it a flying saucer problem?
It's always sounded like to me it was an inconvenience to them. You know, it was something that they just assumed not be a problem. It was something that they could say, they could ignore it. They could tell their pilots to ignore it, you know, even though pilots didn't ignore it. But then when the public started observing it and started calling in and flooding the airports and the military and the police and the FBI's phone lines, then that created problems. You know, that overwhelmed their system. So that was, I believe, the main problem.
Now, as a private corporation that Battelle is, even if they are nonprofit, they do not have to disclose any of their findings or their financials to the public. Now, you found this of particular interest. Am I correct?
Correct. I mean, obviously, you cannot write them or call them and say, give me whatever you have on this topic, or, you know, do y'all have flying saucers or whatever? You can't. It's a private corporation. It has nothing to do with the FOIAs or the things that we try to do with the government. You know, sometimes it's hard enough with the government, but there's absolutely no reason or legal requirement for a corporation to give you that information. They can just laugh and hang up the phone.
Now, do you believe that they still play a major role in anything to do with UAP research?
Yes, they still do. If you obviously there was a UAP drone, a hypersonic drone that went down in the last couple of weeks that was reported. It was something that as soon as we saw it on UFO Twitter, just looking at it and the fact that it was admitted that it had gone down and that it was a drone, I mean, you could look at it and those of us in the know could tell that it was likely a Patel drone. Well, then surprise, surprise, they turned around and put the image of the drone with their Patel name on it, which really surprised everybody that they actually claimed it. So, yeah, I would say they're definitely still in the research.
What about their ties to the United States Air Force?
They are very close to the Air Force. Okay, so Wright-Patterson is in Dayton, and Battelle's main facility is in Columbus. And then you also have Ohio State. So they're kind of like the triangle there for work that is being done. They're very close to get to. I believe it's in within an hour. And there has been talk that there are underground facilities, which likely also includes the tunnels from what many people have stated. That would not be out of the ordinary.
Why do you say that would not be out of the ordinary?
Well, you have a lot of tunnels in connection to facilities, research facilities, and in military bases. It's a convenient way, for one thing, to be able to go underground, particularly in bad weather. And of course, Ohio is a lot of snow and different things there. It would be logical for that to be the case, to have the tunnels that, for walkways or pushing equipment, whatever supplies that are needed back and forth. So it is something that very likely helped them. There are supposed to be vaults there, underground vaults, different underground chambers for different equipment. So it is all something that is pretty much known. There's photos of some of that from people that have managed to take photos for the books and different things.
Lynda, the tie to the United States Air Force always is shrouded in secrecy with a lot of these companies that kind of go through this private black operations. But you were also able to find out that Battelle had also worked with something very controversial and conspiratorial in Project Blue Book. I would love for you to describe that information.
Well, in Project Blue Book, there's obviously different information there that is, you're talking about the EG&G project in particular, or which portion of it?
Well, explain that to us. Is it much bigger than what we think?
Yes, it is. And of course, Project Blue Book was not all of the book. It's not all of the projects. There are projects that were not included in there. There's also a report 14 that has not been out there. There's different versions of the different reports. Battelle was running its own section of the project. And in fact, Howard Cross, who was Dr. Howard Cross, he was a metallurgist, and he was involved in the different research of the metals, the memory metals, and the different things that had gone on since Roswell. But it turned out that he was also working for the government at the same time he was working for Battelle. And so some of that kind of thing is not well known about what he was doing. but he was involved. For instance, it was his Pentacle memorandum that Jacques Vallée and Richard Dolan have discussed. And so he's part of that. Now, so a lot of the Battelle research was not ready for the Project Blue Books, for the Robertson panel in particular. Okay, and Battelle wanted to hold back on it, but part of that happened to do with the fact that they wanted to also stage similar waves. And, you know, we can guess whether it was to fool people, or maybe they thought that was their scientific process of, you know, let's see what people do now when we do this. Of course, you have to think, well, how are they going to really get away with that process? You know, if they didn't have their own flying saucers, how did they think they were going to get away with that? So you have all that controversy. Project Blue Book, I know for certain it did not contain all the research files. It did not contain all the reports. Right. And so that is an issue.
So to clarify everything, they do have a play in Project Blue Book, maybe from an outsider scientific standpoint, but as for being a major player within the research behind all of the stories, that's where they may be not so much involved.
They were involved. It seems like they were taking a different course of action than the Air Force wanted them to take. And the Air Force and the CIA seemed to want to shut up Project Blue Book more so than what Battelle did. And that's one thing I see in the research, is that Battelle at times sent messages on what they were doing. It's just like what I was seeing with the hypersonic drone. You know, they labeled it kind of like at the end. It's kind of like they couldn't wait to put their name on it, but they didn't until the end. It seemed like Battelle at times wanted to take the serious research on the Project Blue Book cases. The CIA wanted it covered up. They wanted it, you know, and CIA, came in about right after Roswell. And so, and it was always known as the Foreign Bureau. Well, you have to question, okay, Foreign Bureau for what? You know, I mean, foreign technology can be perceived as saying it's that foreign, you know, technology out there. It's not what's here. And so that is an issue.
Right. I'm kind of confused by this entire company. And if I go to their website, battelle.org, I see them really promoting the fact that they are working on medical advancements, medical devices, any type of nano and neurotechnology, toxicology, pharmacology, everything along those lines in order to really help people. But as I scroll in further and I Google things a little bit more, I see they're also involved with weaponry and with all sorts of defense type mechanisms and guns and drones. And I'm confused by this, by the focus of this entire company. I mean, obviously they're broken into different sections like a lot of giant corporations are, but in reality, I mean, do they really have a focus, in your opinion, on what they're doing? Or is the medical side a little bit of a front to carry out more of a nefarious side of the defense in UFOs?
That is my personal opinion, is that, you know, like all of this about Battelle is my opinion from the research I have done in I get into these rabbit trails because they're so diverse, and I find a lot of trouble in a lot of areas. But yes, that appears to be their front and very respected. And I can respect them because if they hadn't come up with the titanium rods for legs and things like that, my son would have had an amputated leg from an accident. So I'm thankful that they have made some of the progress that they have made. But yes, they are into aerospace, they're into weapons, they're into all types of military. I mean, they're everywhere. They're Dugway. They manage the chemical biological labs for the Army. Um, they manage nuclear sites. They are the manager for the most of the national laboratories. And as an aside, they also have cyber, which is very embarrassing, I would think, since the national labs just got hacked. And Battelle also not only manages, but they do the cyber for them. So I would be a little embarrassed to have that out there. They have their claws into everything.
I mean, this is just incredible in the fact that if they have been working on this technology and they have been, have been a part of the metamaterial type studies of potential UFO UAP crash materials, do you believe that they are trying to replicate what these craft are? Did any
Yes,
information that you find take you down that rabbit hole?
I actually do believe that. And I believe that the hypersonic drone was just one example of how they got some of that technology to be able to do that. They also have underwater drones, they have underwater projects that they do. So there's really nothing that they are not involved in. And a large percentage of it is military.
What is their ties to EG&G? Now, people may recognize the EG&G from the secret labs out in New Mexico. We've heard them working out at Area 51. Of course, Bob Lazar, if you believe his story, has stated that he's a former employee of EG&G. What are the ties between Battelle and EG&G?
Okay, they were both in the very beginning. They were the Manhattan Project's main companies as far as, they had scientists from all over and they had different universities helping, but they were the ones that actually did the nuclear projects, the atomic projects. And so they were both very involved from the very beginning in that. Now, they both take on similar roles. EG&G has managed the Area 51. They probably still have some management there since they're still active. Battelle probably, and I say this because of some things, that's been mentioned off and on. I would say EG&G and Battelle probably both have current situations out there in the Area 51 or S4 complex, as well as they do in other places. I mean, Battelle definitely does, like at Dugway and other facilities. So yes, they are kind of two peas in a pod on that. It's just EG&G is limited in their scope and in their size.
So the fact that Battelle has been pretty much a hidden company in the entire field of ufology, we can only assume what they know and what they don't know. Has there been any former Battelle employees or scientists who have come out to confirm whether or not there has been UFO UAP studies there?
Yes, one that I do know of is Dr. Irina Scott. She has written a book. She's been involved with MUFON. And so she has a lot of information in her book on the, I'll look at the name real quick. It's Sacred Corridors. That's what she calls her book on Battelle. And so it's a very difficult book to read because it's extremely tiny print, but it is full of information. And so she is one scientist that came forward. And she's also an experiencer.
Right. So do we believe then, or is it safe to assume that Battelle's involvement with the UFO phenomena or the UAP phenomena, we can consider them a major player in trying to decipher what these metamaterials are, in trying to rebuild or reconstruct the technology that has already been brought forward to them by these crash retrievals?
Yes, I believe that's true. And there is a lot on their metamaterials. I mean, they have studied it since Roswell. There's a lot of material out there on it in their projects, so it's no question that they have studied it.
Okay, so as we start to wrap things up here with you regarding this being a private company, the fact that we have any information on Battelle regarding the UAP phenomena is incredible as it is, because as a private corporation, they really don't have to give up any information. So how do we continue to apply the pressure to see what they have?
It would have to be through our task force, for one thing, the one that is going on and supposed to have a report out in June. But I believe that we need to pressure our elected representatives. And this is, again, a worldwide thing. They're not just in the United States. We need to tell our representatives and our senators that, first of all, they should not be making all of this money tax-free and not paying the U.S. taxes on it. That's our taxpayer burden. But in addition to that, they're not the nice little medical company that people think they are. They're a whole lot more than that. But we need to have our senators and representatives push on better management of information, on disclosure of reports, and to have things more out in the open. And I'm not using the big D disclosure word. I'm just saying disclosure of what's going on with them.
Lynda, I want to say thank you so much for coming on Beyond Humanity, talking about your research and what you have learned, not only as an experiencer, but as one of the very many citizen researchers out there who are trying to delve into the depths of this topic and how deep down the Black Project's road it really goes. You deserve to be commended for that.
Thank you, Dave.
Thank you so much.
Nice to talk to you.
Nice to talk to you too.
Thank you.
Thank you once again, Lynda Thompson, for coming on Beyond Humanity. Remember, you can follow Beyond Humanity at uapresearch.com. Give us a follow on Twitter as well at UAP Research. And for myself, Dave Scott, our website, spacedoutradio.com. And you can follow us on Twitter at Spaced Out Radio.